All right. Don't forget, I got to do the poem. I'll make sure I got my audio good. Check your mic for me.
Your mic, check.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, I got to do the poem. Don't let me forget that.
That's why I wrote it down too.
Want to hear a different poem?
Sure.
Artie Farty had a party.
There we go.
Everyone was there. Tutti Frutti blew a beauty, and they all went out for air.
Did Norm MacDonald write that too?
No, it's a different comedian. I learned that years ago. Well, you ready to start?
Yes. Tomorrow will be a better day.
Yep.
Tomorrow is my eternity. Eternity is now. Time.
All right. Well, we're recording. So, right or left?
Right or wrong?
Our voices make a song. For in the end,
we are friends.
And
your
opinion.
I'll defend. I think you do it better if we just do it alone.
Yeah.
Not a good duo.
You want to try again?
Nope.
Okay. Welcome to Scott versus Scott.
I'm Scott.
I'm the Madman, also named Scott. So, we like to debate things here on this show. Should we get right into it?
We can debate and discuss. Yes, get right into it. How was your weekend? Fuck your weekend.
No, it wasn't great.
Okay.
Yeah. Wintertime blues.
Wah, wah. Let's get pass the harmonica. I know you got a harmonica over there.
I can't play it. It's always dark outside.
Scott, let me tell you.
What?
As a person who was born in the year of our Lord in 1991, I have to say, I think the Electoral College is outdated.
You think it's a dinosaur, huh?
I think it's outdated, just like you.
I was, I was watching The Office, and Oscar, the Democrat on the show, he's dressed as a dinosaur in Halloween, and somebody comes up to him and says, "Oh, cool dinosaur costume." He's like, "No, I'm the Electoral College." And it's like, no, I don't think it's outdated. I think it's more relevant than ever right now. The Electoral College.
Why do you think it's more relevant? Why do you think that it's more relevant than ever? The people need to know, Scott. Why do you think it's more relevant than ever?
Because this is not a democracy. And a lot of people forget that fact, is that this is not a democracy that we live in. This is a republic. All right? And decisions should not be made based upon popular opinion. And that's just how things were made when they even first started this country.
But even the forefathers thought that separating the votes like this would be the downfall of the republic. And it has. It's created the two-party system.
Well, there's always been a two-party system. There will always be a two-party system. That's just the parties change over time, but there's always going to be like two basic camps in terms of political thought. But when they formed this nation, they formed it with the idea they wanted states in the republic. They wanted equal representation in Congress, especially if you're a smaller state. But the more populous states like New York, they wanted more sway in the coming republic. And so that's why the House of Representatives was put into play, because that bases representation upon population, which I think is a very bad move. I think it's one of the biggest flaws in the U.S. Constitution is the House of Representatives. And so...
but that ties into the Electoral College, does it not?
Absolutely it does, because that's like, what?
So you just made my argument for me.
No. 435 members in Congress that don't need to be a part of the process at all. You're talking about all we need is 100 electors, and a speaker or the House majority, or the vice president breaks a tie. That's it. The vice president breaks a tie. And so I think, I'm not sure.
So are you saying you think the Electoral College should exist, but that it should be reduced?
No, I think the Electoral College causes candidates only to go to a few states. You never hear about a presidential candidate going to North Dakota.
Yeah, I know. That's one of the reasons why I think the Electoral College should be diminished. Because it doesn't promote the...
I think it should still exist. I'm just saying that you shouldn't have more electors in the Electoral College just because you have more population. 54 electoral votes for California is insane. That's a ridiculous number of votes in the Electoral College. and gives them more power than states like North Dakota.
But and the way that it's set up, California should have a few more votes because every state is given 3 to start off, and then they distribute the votes. So you have other smaller states that have 3 or 4 votes that should only have 1 or 2.
In my perfect world, yeah, I would say 2. I think every state should have 2 electors. You know,
like Ohio has 18, and they should have 20. And like I said, you have other states. I don't have any examples. I should have maybe written one down in my research. But you have other states that have 3 or 4 or 5 votes that should have 1, 2, or 3.
Well, I think each state should have equal amounts of votes.
Okay.
You know, I think that's what is fair in a democratic.
So you believe in the Electoral College, but you think that the stipulation should be reduced.
I think that it should be equal votes for each state in Congress. Just because you have more people, you don't get any more votes. That's my opinion. You know.
Oh yeah, I agree with that part too. And I agree that sways the vote. And I think that's one of the reasons why it should be a popular vote.
Popular vote is relevant to your elected officials. You vote for those people who vote for you.
But those are the people who are in the House of Representatives that you were just saying you didn't want to know.
You also have senators. I'm talking about just senators. I'm saying the original flaw in the Constitution was the House of Representatives, where it was representation based upon population.
So once again, you're saying that the Electoral College should exist, but not the way that it does.
Correct. I think the Electoral College should own. I think that our government should get rid of the House of Representatives because I think that unfairly biases states like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and California. These states that have higher populations. And so in the other representation in the Senate is equal representation. So that means that the population centers have the powers. And that's why you end up with these democratically controlled cities that are just falling apart. They're turning into third world nations.
Yeah, but they control the top 10 cities in the country only control less than 10% of the population. And the top 20 cities control 20%.
What do you mean control the population?
As far as like the vote and stuff. According to the research that I did earlier. The YouTube videos that I watched.
But that's the point, is that the popular vote should be considered by your senator in my perfect world. All right? And but at the same time, they retain the agency to vote their own conscience. So, I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Well, what happens in a state that, in your perfect world, what happens in a state with, because you're saying that it's 2 votes, right? So what if 1 vote's left and 1 vote's right? Then what happens? Do you defer to the popular vote in of the state?
That is what they call a purple state.
And then what do you, because one of the things that I don't agree with most is the winner take all, right? So
yes,
right,
correct.
A winner taking all of the state.
Yes, even in the House of Representatives, I don't think that all the representatives should just agree with what the populace votes for. All right, I don't think that they should do that. I think they should vote their consciences. I think they should vote for their districts, especially when it comes to the House of Representatives. If you are a representative of a conservative district, even in a liberal state, your vote should still be counted. Those voices in that district should be heard, regardless of even if the state is mostly liberal or conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Those voices should still be heard. But like me, as a conservative in Virginia, and my electoral votes went to Joe Biden, there was no point in me even voting. See what I mean?
Right.
And that really disenfranchises people who vote that way, and in states that vote that way. I guess it's my responsibility as a conservative to move to a conservative area where my voice can be heard.
And gerrymandering or move to a state like Wyoming where your voice counts more. A vote in Wyoming counts 4 times more than counts as 4 California votes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the problem that the House of Representatives causes.
Right.
And I think we just need to get rid of that.
Right. Well, then it creates like gerrymandering.
Well, gerrymandering is a whole different thing. That's a nightmare all of itself. That is like the full-time job of most representatives.
Right.
And it irritates the shit out of me. They're always redrawing these district lines. Always. Every single year they're doing this. Just so that they can, get those votes.
Right.
And
it disenfranchises a lot of people, and
Exactly.
it probably causes a lot of apathy.
absolutely causes apathy in me.
Yeah,
I mean, and if I lived in a district that was constantly being gerrymandered,
right,
and it's usually in these urban centers,
right.
you know.
So if you feel disenfranchised or feel apathy from the way that gerrymandering works, you can only imagine how people who live in those urban centers feel. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I mean. If if you're conservative in New York, I mean, why would you even go to vote? Why would you even talk to people on the street or even express your opinion in any way? Because this is what, happens in urban centers is that the people in urban, high densely populated become homogenized, and that is not a good thing.
But you still should talk to people, because then you meet people like you and I who, when we first met each other at the beginning of the year, we didn't very much see eye to eye, and we still don't all the time, and that's why we do the podcast. But we've come to find that we have a lot more things in common. And I think then when we have conversations like this, where I come into it like I don't believe in Electoral College, and you come into it saying you do believe in Electoral College, and now we're actually having the conversation and getting into the details, and you believe in Electoral College, but in a much more reduced fashion. And I think the point that we're getting to is a compromise. And maybe more conservatives in those high liberal areas, or more liberals in those high conservative areas, would find that if they stopped at the farmer's market or stopped at the coffee shop and talked to that person that's different than them and actually sat down and have a conversation, they might find a compromise, a gray area.
Sure.
That's not always going to happen, you know what I mean?
I think 10 years ago that may have been true. But in this day and age, people have become bullies, especially when they know they outnumber one side or the other.
Right.
And I don't like that. And if you're a conservative who lives in an urban center like New York or LA, and you walk around the streets and stuff like that, you probably don't want to get into a conversation with people about, something like masking, all these controversial issues that somehow are controversial, and
since everything's spun into a political, what I mean,
and can quickly escalate into some sort of justified violence.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand why a lot of people who have these very strong opinions, because who doesn't have strong opinions?
Yeah.
I mean, YouTube is filled with people with strong opinions.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, everyone has strong opinions, but it's how you conduct yourself in society.
Right.
It's like you and I can have very different, like, for example, my Shock Monkey Radio show is very different from what we talk about here. It's usually just me going off on my crazy ass tangents.
Right.
And following that path for an hour. And so, that's just my mind.
Yeah, but
everyone has their own mind.
Right. And people get, I'm not saying you, but as far as like, violence breaking out, people are really emotionally attached to these ideas, and it becomes a part of their identity, and they get extremely passionate about it, and there is no reason, and tempers flare, you know what I mean? It just escalates. There's nowhere to go for it but up and but to escalate. I mean, you've even seen me earlier this year get emotionally attached to my ideas when talking about politics and stuff. And I'm like, it's all an act, it's all theater and conspiracy theory, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And because I don't lean left or right, but I still have got my heels dug in my beliefs, at least at that moment in time, have my heels dug in so far my beliefs the same way that people the far left and the far right are. As me being the extreme middle, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, when it comes to, we all have to compromise in some way just to interact with each other in society.
Right, yeah.
And so that's the daily compromise. But then again, I don't feel a need to wander down the street screaming out my political beliefs.
Right.
I'd rather truncate it into an hour of my time on a podcast. But
people who want to see it can see it.
Right.
You're not forcing it down anyone's throat.
Exactly.
You're not on a soapbox on, Caroline Street.
Right.
Shouting your beliefs at everyone.
Exactly. But I mean, you got to understand.
Luigi was the better Mario brother.
Exactly. But the idea is that this whole argument that we're having about the Electoral College is based upon a compromise that happened when this country was formed. All right? Smaller states who didn't have a great population, they wanted equal representation.
Right.
In Congress.
Well,
However,
and the reason a lot of the states didn't have the population is because their population was mainly slaves. States like Virginia was 40% slaves, and
they counted like a third of a person each or something like that.
Right. And John Madison was even quoted as saying, if we had direct elections to the presidents, then Virginians won't get elected president.
Really?
Yeah. According to the YouTube video I watched.
But okay. Well, here's the thing about the whole if they're slaves, I don't think you should count them as population.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that sounds cruel, but I mean, let's face it. I would think that a population means like free persons.
And that was the thing, is that the state was as far as like the population or the census would go, the 40% of the population was slaves, taking up the actual land space, you know what I mean, in the area, as compared to other states it was more free men in the North.
Correct.
So the problem is that they felt a president would always get elected from the North because if it was a popular vote, you know what I mean?
Correct, and that's why the smaller states wanted to introduce this using slaves as part of their population
as part of the Electoral College, right?
So that was a compromise they wanted to come up with.
It was part of their argument to keep the Electoral College, you know what I mean?
Well, it's because
for the southern states.
Well, because these smaller states, particularly the southern states at the time, they had less white people population and more black people population. And so because they felt disenfranchised by the North, because the North had higher population states and therefore more electors, they felt disenfranchised for the North all the way up till the Civil War. As horrifying as living in slavery times, that's what was going on at the time. Where these white people were trying to count slaves for their population so they get more electoral votes in Congress. All because we made this compromise between equal representation between states for electors or electors based upon population.
And it continued though. It's continued after the Reconstruction era and into the civil rights movement and such. So it kind of, I know this is almost a cliche topic or phrase, but it's systemic racism to a certain degree, because it still got used by the state of Alabama, Mississippi. They still kept this as to like you were talking about, disenfranchise it's like a gerrymandering on a bigger scale. You know what I mean? It disenfranchises the urban population of those southern states. You know what I mean? Because then when the slaves were freed, they still take up a large amount of the South. You know what I mean? The African American community.
Yeah, but
So the Electoral College still disenfranchises the black community in the southern states because of like the winner take all type rules and all the gerrymandering and the way that the House of Representatives and things, you know what I mean? So maybe if it was downsized and things were, because all of that exists because of all these weird bullshit compromises and laws that have been put in place after the original shit that was put in place when it was meant to be a republic, like you said.
Yes.
So are you thinking that dialing it back and reducing the power of the Electoral College and the number of votes from a state?
Yes, I think.
And the House of Representatives would.
Well, I think, like I said, I think we need to get rid of the House of Representatives.
Yep.
And you would understand if you were more interested in news like I would, you would understand that that's a very conservative position to take. Say getting rid of the House is unheard of to a Democrat. They wouldn't want to believe that because they know that the House is what gives them their power. That's what the Democrats have been running on for a long time. And so I don't think that. But you got to understand that's 435 different electors that we can get rid of. 455 different people who are gerrymandering districts that we can get rid of. All the assistance, all the legal fees, all the documentation for all those people. We can get rid of all that bureaucracy. This is a very libertarian idea in the sense is like, let's make our government smaller because all they're doing is taking our money and running a credit card in debt over and over again. And that's our tax dollars they're spending. When they're talking about the national debt, you're talking about a credit card that we gave the government. And that's 435 people we can get rid of in our government and avoid a whole bunch of nonsense and bureaucracy.
No, I agree with that.
We're about 20 minutes in. What do you think?
I think we can move on. I think we actually came to a compromise. Well, at least my perception of what this debate was going to be coming into it, because I thought you were going to be more of just for the Electoral College and your reasons behind it, and the way that you think it should be framed, I think is a compromise that could be met with people who come into the argument like I did today, thinking that it just shouldn't exist at all.
Well, one thing about the Electoral College is that it started because they did not think the average voter was intelligent enough, because literacy at the United States at the time was very, very low. 1770s.
The average voter still has a low literacy rate in this country. You know what I mean?
No, we're far more educated than we were back then. Most of the people were agrarian. There's no reason to learn how to read. There's a lot of people who didn't go to university. The people who did go to university were in the North. That's where the first universities in the United States popped up, with Massachusetts, New York. And so, therefore, like, all those people were either educated, who started the revolution, who formed these founding documents. They're educated either in England or in the United States. And so they were educated people, and they thought that the average farmer wasn't trustworthy enough to give them direct control over who's going to be in the office. Right. And so that's why they came up with the Electoral College, because at the time, if you're a senator, if you're a representative, you're an educated person, usually wealthy. That's why they also had, they wanted you to be a landowner to vote. They wanted you to be white and male to vote. And that's why they started that way. They want you to be an educated white male making these decisions for our country, not necessarily some poor bumpkin out in the middle of the sticks that doesn't know how to read, doesn't even read the paper, doesn't know what's going on in the country, doesn't know what's going on, in making these decisions. And yeah, we're more educated than people were back then, but I think that
I still think there's a certain level of people that we're more educated, but it's still limited. You know what I mean?
The same number of stupid people exist. It's just that they know how to read and work a computer.
Mm-hmm. Even myself, I look at a lot of topics and I think that I don't know enough about this to have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that if I didn't research the topic or spend time studying it, that I'm not capable of understanding it and therefore having an opinion on it.
Right.
But I think there's an incredible amount of people like myself who are, even if they are capable of understanding the issues, they're too distracted by Netflix and life. Yeah. And I mean, I should say life in general. Yeah. Life first, work and life and everything else that fucking comes with it.
Yeah. I mean, half of my show is based upon the news.
Right.
And it's because, I actively follow it and watch it, and keep up with it. And I'm the kind of person that I think they wanted for an elector, an informed voter. And when they came up with the Electoral College, they were concerned about uninformed voters. And that's what we still have a lot of those today. There's a ton of people out there who have been brainwashed by some institution or another. Let's just call them colleges and universities. And so that they're
the media.
And the media, and they're very low information voters. And additionally, they're only casual about it. They don't research it intensely. They just take the bite from either CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News, or whatever, Ben Shapiro, whatever, and they go out in the world and just spout it off because they're casual about it. They don't really care that much about it. And so, if you're a low information voter, if you're that kind of person, I think you should stay out of the arguments. I don't think you should be, burning anything down, attacking anybody in the streets, or yelling at people for wearing a mask. If you're that wishy-washy about getting involved in politics,
right? Yeah.
Don't go out in the streets if you're uninformed, But anyway, we can move on.
I think we can move on.
All right. So let us know in the comments who won that one. It's Madman, M-A-D-A-M. Man.
I can't work with this man anymore.
What, you want to fight about it?
You want to fight about it? You want to throw it out?
Not really.
Okay.
You want to throw hands? When's the last time you threw hands?
Oh, fuck. I burnt that brain cell.
Burnt?
Oh, like back in 2016? 2015?
The election, man. It was a rough one.
It was around that year. Yeah, it was around that time.
A lot of fist fights around election day, 2016. So tell me about it. What was it?
It was this guy, I won't say his name, but he was just in a fucking mood. And me and him have always kind of had tension. And I was actually trying to be like a mediator between a situation, and he was just being a fucking grumpy ass.
Yeah, some people want to fight no matter what.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if I pushed, I don't know who pushed who first, but then he's a little guy too. But I just locked him up. I locked him up and like in a clinch and just started kneeing him. Just started kneeing him in the face and walking him up and down in the hallway like that. And then when he tried to turn and run away from me, I threw a couple punches.
You're tall. You should be throwing hands.
Yeah.
You got more reach than most people. There's a lot of tall guys that don't know that.
That knee is dangerous in the clinch, though.
Yeah, you're tall and bony, too.
Yeah, there's a lot of power coming from the legs.
Oh, yeah.
It's good times.
Sent in the hospital or anything like that?
No hospital visit.
Okay, good. Yeah, last time I got in a fight was somebody shoved DK in a bar.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Has he told you about this?
No.
Yeah. He'll tell you the whole drama that led up to this, but some dude shoved him in a bar. And when he did that, I just came over to him. I grabbed him by the throat with both hands. And I had my elbows up like this. So he kept trying to reach around, like punch me. And I was just keeping him. He couldn't hit me that way. So all he could do was get his fingers around to my glasses. He pulled my glasses off as I'm turning him, like throwing him down on the floor. Right? And he's scratching around my eyes like this. And I just held him there on the floor until the bouncer grabbed me and pulled me off.
Good times.
And he had to say, let go, like 3 times. But
a lot of the fights that I've gotten in, when I start getting the upper hand, I just get into like a mode like that too, like just
Well, I call that Brock Sampson mode. That's where you can just overpower somebody. You can overpower somebody. And that was what I did in that fight. I mean, I've never really thrown a punch.
Yeah.
And so usually, I wrestled in high school and I know a little Aikido, and so mostly I've used that. So,
you big Steve Seagal fan?
Based upon my body type, you would think I am, but no. My dad worked for the federal government, and he fought Aikido. So
you didn't box in the Navy, nothing like that.
Boxing scares the hell out of me. Because,
why?
Because the cardio those guys do is just ridiculous.
Oh yeah, true.
It's ridiculous, and they have to be like that. I mean, in a fight that I've been in, if it goes longer than like 15 seconds, I'm done for. You know, I got a what they call a high initiative. If I had a character sheet, I have a real high initiative. I know when a fight's going to break out. There was this one time when I was in the Navy, I was duty driver, and we were in, I want to say Mayport, Florida, which is near Jacksonville. And so there's a bunch of my shipmates at this bar, right? And we get a call. It's like there's a bunch of them over there. It's like we think something's gonna go down there. So come on over, come pick all these people up. And so I go there, and the cops are there, right? And there's something going on. You know, this fight hasn't broken out, but the cops are there. And all of a sudden, a fight broke out. Like as soon as I walked in the door behind these cops, I'm the only one in uniform. Everyone else is in civvies, right? All the other sailors are in civvies. And this fight broke out. And there's this one dude who had his back to like a wall, and he was holding a drink. And this fight broke out. And at that moment, he like panicked. I don't know if you've ever seen this in a fight, but this dude, he panicked and just turned and ran. He ran straight into the wall and knocked himself out. The 2 guys that were fighting right next to him, they stopped and just started laughing so hard that they like stopped the fight. But there was the rest of a fracas going on in the bar, and so the cops just ended up like grabbing sailors, throwing them to me. It's like, you a Navy? You a Navy? Threw them to me, and I threw them in the duty van. Threw in somebody else to me, and I threw them in the duty van. It's like orders. I got to take you guys back. You guys are causing trouble. So and a lot of these guys outranked me. I was just a seaman in E3 at the time. And they're like, it's like, I'm a first-class petty officer. It's like, you are drunk. Get in the van. So it was kind of a thrill that night. I mean, it's not like a fight I was in, you know, but I mean, I guess I was taking combatants out. So I felt like I did my job that night. It was one of my proudest moments in the Navy because I felt like these guys would have gotten into some serious trouble because that conversation on the way back, it's like, oh, I could have kicked that dude's ass. Hey, go by Taco Bell. It's like, I can't go by Taco Bell. Go by Taco Bell. I order you to take me to Taco Bell. You are drunk, Chief.
Man, now I want to end this podcast. Go to Taco. Scott versus Scott is sponsored by the Chicken Chalupa. Chicken Chalupa is the only taco from Taco Bell that I eat before the Scott versus Scott podcast.
Anyway. You ever have your ass kicked?
Sure.
When was the last time you got your ass kicked?
That was even more long ago. It was when I was like in high school. Got blindsided one time, like sucker punched by a guy.
Yeah.
I was drunk as shit. And I was in the back seat of a Tahoe, and he like opened up the door and fucking hit me in the eye, and then he just hit me a bunch of times, and yeah, it was bad.
Surprised you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like an athlete too, and a fighter. That was like his thing. You know what I mean? That's what they like to do.
Yep.
I had a lot of people like that I grew up with. A lot of my fights growing up and whooping people's asses was my dad. I was getting in fights with my dad.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of fights with my dad. Good times.
Well, I don't want to dig too deep into that. No offense.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
No offense taken.
Last time I had my ass kicked was I was in 6th grade. And the only reason I lost is because I lost my temper. You know, I just got so angry. This dude like threw water in my ear, and at the time I had had a couple surgeries on my ear because I had tubes put in. I had trouble with drainage in my ear, and so and I was just, that was a complicated time. That's when I lived in Georgia, and I was getting beat up like all the time. Back then I was a pacifist. I called myself a pacifist. I never fought back. I didn't want to hurt anybody because before that I had gotten into fights, plenty of fights, being like 6, 7 years old, growing up in the 80s. You know, it was like you'd get into a fight every other day, especially in the summer, and, a couple times you really hurt somebody. And I was just like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore because I was good at it,
Yeah.
But after a while, I just said, I'm not going to fight at all. And so I got beat up a lot. And then at soccer practice, this one teammate, threw this water in my ear, and I just lost my temper and I charged him. Right. And I'll never forget the look on his face where he's just like, oh, really? We're okay. And then he just goes, whap, whap, hit me twice, like go right down on my knees. And I was just like, oh, I'm not angry anymore all of a sudden. And it was funny because a couple guys who were on my team I went to school with too, they came to, they had told people about it. And they're like, hey man, I heard you got your ass kicked. It's like, yeah. Like, you just suck. And I was like, because when you're that age, it's kind of embarrassing, to lose a fight. But at the same time, I was like, well, I was wrong. I was mad. I charged the guy for no real good reason, so I kind of deserved to get my ass kicked. So, but I mean, that was just 2 punches, that was the last time I lost a fight, that I engaged in. I don't count, if I don't fight back, I don't count it as a loss. Maybe that's just what wussies like me say.
Right, you just count it as
Yeah, I stopped a fight with one Aikido move.
Okay.
Yeah, guy was being belligerent with somebody. I was
Did he have a sword?
No. It wasn't, we weren't samurai, dude. Meeting on a windswept night, It wasn't like that. This guy, he had a beer in his hand, right? And he was being belligerent and like pointing with his left hand. And I could tell this guy was going to fight my friend. My friend's just like, nah, man, no, just leave me alone. But this dude's holding this beer, and he takes another step, and I just know he's about to go and throw a punch right any second. And so I grabbed I forget the name of the hold, but I grabbed his hand, I just, whoop, like that. The beer fell out of his hand. He dropped down to a one knee, right? And because he was surprised by this, his beer starts rolling across the floor, and everyone turns and looks and sees him go down. And they're like, and the bartender looks up, hey, what's going on over there? And it's like, oh, he dropped his beer. Let me buy you another beer. I helped him up and I bought him a beer, and he didn't want to fight anymore. I probably shouldn't tangle with this group of guys.
I remember I got in a fight with this kid in 7th grade, the lunchroom. That was a good time. He threw like a straw at me off his juice box.
Yeah.
And I got up and walked around the table and I threw like a haymaker, like a bear. And when I hit him, I opened my hand. So I like grabbed his head and slammed it on the lunch table. And then I put him in a headlock and threw him on the ground. Yeah. Then the principal or the resource officer came over and like put me in a like grabbed my arms, and the kid got up off the ground and hit me in the face when I had my arms behind my back by the principal.
Yeah.
I didn't know the principal was helping him out for the tag team championship, man. If I knew that, I would have.
MVP, apparently.
Yeah, man. He had a good manager.
Yeah, in 7th grade, I got into a fight that I won without a blow. All right. Yeah.
Was he drunk?
No, it's just, you know how it is in 7th grade. You don't really know anything. So,
you think you know?
Well, yeah, and it's like all you see is a bunch of movies. Like Gavin McInnes tells a story about how he won a fight without doing anything because the guy, he got so worked up and he threw this, he was trying to throw this roundhouse kick or something like that and totally, screwed up and, knocked the wind out of himself by falling to the ground. It was kind of like that, right? So this guy who was sitting next to me at the nerd table at lunch, because that's where I sat at the nerd table.
Right, of course.
Mm-hmm. And so he, I'll never forget this guy. His name was Benjamin. He was one of the nerds, one of the smartest kids in the class, actually. And he threatens this guy Benjamin with a ketchup packet. He's got a ketchup packet folded. He's like, I'm going to squirt this all over your face if you don't call me the coolest person ever, or something like that. And so I turned to him. He's sitting right next to me. So I turned to him and it's like, take that out of his face before somebody hurts you. And he's like, oh, you want to go? And so I was like, all right, fine. So we both get up. We push our chairs back. We're in the lunchroom. And so he's just, come on. And I was like, all right. And I'm just standing there, At this point, I already knew some Aikido, so I was just waiting. And so he just comes at me and he goes, ugh, throws a jab right hand. He was so horrible. It was so slow. I just parried it. All right, and go, like that. And the next thing he does, he tries to do a roundhouse. What is that, like a haymaker?
Yeah.
Like that?
It's like a hook.
Oh, yeah. It's slow as fuck. And so I just kind of step back like that and whip right in front of me. And then he gets furious that, 2 punches, he didn't get anything out of it. So he just backs up and he puts his elbow out like this and just ran straight at me, jumping. He jumped at me. So I just stepped out of the way and he lands on the floor and slides under this table with a bunch of girls who start kicking him. Ew, nerd, 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 nerd. And that's when I hear everyone shout, nerd fight, nerd fight, nerd fight.
Nerd fight. That's awesome. It was the worst and best fight of the year.
Well, people said, I became a little bit cooler that year because of that. Like, he's king of the nerds.
King of the nerds. Yes, he rules over them. He's the dungeon master.
Exactly. Yeah, that's all the fights that I've seen. I remember.
Do you like to watch fights? I'm a big fan of UFC.
Oh, not me.
I watch UFC like every Saturday night.
I like boxing, not UFC.
You like boxing?
Yeah.
There was a big fight last night, Saturday night.
I go through binges. It's like, and they're rare. Mm-hmm. Like, where I'll just get into fighting. Like, I think I sat down and watched like 12 hours of Floyd Mayweather fights because someone told me he's badass or something like that. And he is. And so, but I mean, I'll get in binges. It's like, I haven't watched it since. I haven't watched boxing since.
I like to go back and watch Tyson.
Yeah, old fights are always fun.
Yeah.
You can ask anybody who's into boxing and say, what are the best old fights? And, and you can find them pretty much anywhere and watch them. And so I do enjoy that. I don't like UFC because it's the grounded pound idea. I don't like that.
Yeah. Do you think fighting is necessary?
Fighting is necessary?
Do you think fighting is necessary in like a society? Yes,
absolutely. People who want to say something like violence doesn't solve anything, that's nonsense. That's how we solved World War II. That's how we ended slavery in the United States. Violence does solve things. All right. People who say that you should always try to find a nonviolent solution, but sometimes violence does solve things.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd word it like that, but yeah, fighting and warfare has been a part of. It's just a part of nature. It's just kind of part of nature. I'm not saying that you should go out looking for fights or, you know what I mean. But it is something that sometimes animals just have to work it out. You know what I mean? Sometimes they just have to. Someone has to assert dominance, and even like we talked about on the first episode when we talked about sports, I gave that example of Michael Jordan and one of his teammates, Steve Kerr, getting in a fight at practice. And after that became his most trusted teammate,
Yeah.
And I'm sure that happens in the military a lot too.
Absolutely.
It's when two guys get two big egos and then, finally go to war with each other. Well, that's when that's the guy you can go to war with.
Well, even before that, is that you run into these guys, you butt heads with them, and then sooner or later, they're throwing hands, and you get in a fight, and then next thing you know, they're best friends.
Mm-hmm.
They go and they're getting beers together. I mean, like seriously, I have seen that many times.
Right.
Where two guys would just have just constantly butting heads, come like enemies at first. They fight, all of a sudden best friends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know how many best friends I've met like that. So, I hated this dude right off the bat. Then he kicked my ass, and I was like, all right, I guess he's cool. So, I mean, I think that it's just our culture is not very masculine oriented or sees any useful nature to masculinity these days. But there is a real thing that happens with men when it comes to conflict, that men come, when they come into conflict. Mm-hmm. It's like even the Charlie Murphy True Hollywood Stories, that's where you got to find respect, with another man. I don't care if you're Rick James, if you're slapping somebody, I don't care who he is.
Yeah.
You're Rick James, you need to be checked.
You got to, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that's just the way men are.
Right.
And I mean, I know this happened back in the 80s or whatever like that, hanging out with Rick James and stuff like that. But I mean, I think that was a time when that stuff was still allowed, when men would have to check each other like that and to keep somebody in line. And the reason why Rick James was behaving in such a way, is because he's too big for himself, Mm-hmm. And Charlie Murphy's the kind of guy that's not gonna what do you say is like I'm the brother to steal on. It's like that he was in the Navy. That's how we do things. It's like, you can't do that. You can't live and work or be around or be friends with somebody who is constantly going to be acting that way. And so, if it takes violence to check somebody like that, beat their legs on the couch to teach them a lesson, it's like, he's driving away. It's like, man, we just helped him. We taught him.
No, I agree. I agree 100%.
So, I mean, it's hard to say, one way or another if, a nonviolent solution should, always be
the priority.
Should be the priority.
And we're not encouraging violence,
right?
But sometimes it happens, and sometimes it is for a greater good. But
if you have a coked up rock star on your couch grinding mud in there, it's like sometimes the only thing you can listen to is a bunch of pounding on the legs,
right? Yeah.
And they said specifically, we're just beating his legs. Maybe he'll learn his lesson. Keep his feet off the damn couch.
Yeah, no shit. All right, you ready to move on to this last topic?
Yeah, last topic. We went a little long last week and didn't get into it.
Yeah, we did not get into it. You guys ready to talk about religion and spirituality?
How we got into it? You want to start? How'd you get into religion and spirituality?
My introduction to religion and spirituality is as a child going to church, being brought to church. I grew up.
What kind of church?
It was a Baptist church. Oh. No, I don't remember what kind of the original church was, but yeah, they're not Baptist church. But yeah, Christian. Grew up Christian.
Like Protestant?
Protestant, yes, okay. Protestant. And then as I got older, church kind of stopped being like a mandatory thing.
Of course.
And then as I got older and started getting into high school and then later and started, studying weird things like I like to do. I've always been interested in the weird and the obscure since I was a kid. You know what I mean? Sure. Like in 7th grade, we were talking about middle school today. I was obsessed with, like Bigfoot and Chupacabra, Loch Ness Monster and stuff like that. Or I've always been really interested in serial killers and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Just absolutely. Kind of oddities. But as I got into conspiracy theories and religion and theology, philosophy as I got older and psychedelics,
right?
That's when I really started getting more in touch with kind of what my beliefs, what resonated with me, and started kind of forming my own belief system.
Right. I mean, I feel like pretty much everybody has to do that. Like I said with politics, a lot of people are very casual about religion as they are with politics, where it's just, it's something they do. It's more of a social club than anything.
Right, yeah.
And so a lot of people don't think very deep on the subjects at all. In fact, I think you'll find more people in the like psychedelic community who are more interested in that kind of thing about spirituality and philosophy and stuff like that than you would be in a church.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a Baptist church as well. Growing up Protestant, Northern Baptist, Southern Baptist. I moved all over the country, and so yeah, I grew up Baptist, and I was very active in the youth group and stuff like that. And when as I started getting older, a lot of my questions got tougher and tougher. And especially when you're like 16, 17, the questions I was asking a youth director, it was giving them real hard times. And they were referring me to other people in the church and stuff like that. And I was like, you probably need to talk to so-and-so about that. And even then, when I talked to those people, I didn't like a lot of the answers I was getting, because I thought the church's mission should be, helping the less fortunate. And that's what I got into. That's when I got into what is called World Changers, where the group that goes around, you raise money to go and go to these poor areas and build houses for poor people and stuff like that. And I did that 4 years in a row, I think, or 3 years in a row. And so and I thought that was the point of a church. I thought that's what churches should be doing. And so after high school, I stopped going to church. It was I felt like I outgrew it, I felt like I needed more than they were providing in terms of my philosophy, my curiosity about philosophy and alternative viewpoints. I wanted to talk about the Church of Satan or without it just being
super taboo and just
yeah, it was getting into all the dramas, why is he bringing up Satanism and stuff like that. I wanted to have real conversations about these things because they exist.
Right.
But I thought that in a church it was far too casual about it and so forth. And it's let's talk about the Latter-day Saints and so forth. Let's have conversations about these things that are not, in the Bible. I want to talk about these things. I guess I was Gnostic in that way, where I wanted to an intellectual understanding of the divine, and a lot of the arguments I would get would be, you can't intellectualize something that great. And I was like, sure,
right. Yeah.
Sure. And then you want to talk about people who use psychedelics and have spiritual experiences or DMT and so forth and have near-death experiences. Even those subjects were taboo in a conservative Christian church.
Right. Yeah. It's considered satanic and devilish. And I think a lot of the indoctrination that's handed down through the Christian church is handed down from the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church is not an organization that I agree with at all. Pontius Pilate, a Roman Catholic, is the one who killed Jesus.
He wasn't Roman Catholic.
He was Roman.
He was Roman. Yeah,
Excuse me.
They were still polytheistic at the time.
Yes.
See, because Jesus that was the whole story was playing out. There wasn't already a religion based upon Jesus at that point.
Right, but
Pontius Pilate wasn't Roman Catholic.
All right, I should have stopped at Roman. I'm sorry. Madman. Quit laughing at me.
That's all right.
I really feel like the Catholic Church is the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with a lot of the fear mongering that they've passed down, a lot of the indoctrination. I don't like the way that the story of Jesus is preached. It's a religion indoctrinated in guilt, as Alan Watts would say, and
yeah. I like the phrasing in Dogma where it says you don't. They told her it's you're Catholic, you don't celebrate your faith, you mourn it. I think that's
right.
a very good way to put it.
Right.
And so, I have my issues with the Catholic Church too, and I think that that's the whole reason why Protestantism exists. I mean, that's how it came to be. Is that there was a bunch of people like Martin Luther nailing. It was hang on a second, in German.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on a second. I can't do a German accent. Hang on a second, yeah. That's wrong. Anyway, so that all started because the Catholic faith wanted to take this theocratic route to it, theocracy. They wanted to change, become a government, And I think religion should not be a part of the government.
Right.
Theocracies around the world are not good places to live.
Right.
And most of the theocracies you find tend to be these Islamic countries that have like Sharia law. Where why that woman showed her hair in public, we got to stone her. It's like these theocracies aren't very good places. And when you talk about Rome and you talk about the Vatican City, which is a separate entity from Rome as a government, so when you're talking about Vatican City and the faith of Catholicism, you're talking about a kind of a loyalty to a certain government. And like any government, that government is corrupt in some ways.
Right,
and because they get so much money through the charitable giving, like all that money goes up. That's why they have bishops and archbishops. Yeah. And all these people,
it's like a mafia.
It is. It's like a mafia.
It's exactly like a mafia.
And even these concepts that they have, like of confession and so forth, like confession is not mentioned anywhere in the Bible where you got to confess your sins to some clergy member. I mean, I think that's the whole point of the blood of Christ, is to rip the veil between God and man. You don't have to enter into the Holy of Holies anymore to access God. And that's how it was up until that point when Jesus died for our sins. And so, I mean, the whole idea of Catholicism, the idea of the confessional, is that they wanted to be able to control governments around them until they became their own government. And that's what they did, is like, so they have you come in and list all your dirty deeds. Right. And so that way they can keep tabs on people and even possibly blackmail these people, in order to influence governments to operate the way they want to operate. And that is not the role of religion, in my opinion. I guess it's been a long time since Martin Luther, and it's kind of ingrained in us now. But you got to understand, there are wars that have been fighting this recently in the 80s between Catholics and Protestants.
I think that a lot of the interpretation, or the way that the Bible is interpreted and written, is passed down from the Catholic Church, though, as far as Christianity as a whole, and that because of the way that the indoctrination is, and the some of the closed-minded values, not being able to have those conversations like you were talking about earlier, it's turned a lot of people off from the Christian church, especially people from like my generation and younger, and myself for a while. I wasn't very into the Christian church, and I'm not in the typical sense, and I know you aren't either, you're not going to church every Sunday and stuff like that. No, but there's a lot of things that I just believe are wrong with that organized religion side of things.
Sure.
And my beliefs on the Bible, it just doesn't align with the typical Christian biblical belief, and it's hard for me to express myself and talk to those people because of the closed-mindedness, and it makes it difficult, And it's also difficult for me to talk to people in my generation because of how like uncool Jesus is, or Christianity is. Well, it's not a fucking popular thing, It's
they're very uninterested in it.
Right. There's a certain connotation that comes with it of being in church, and it's boring, and somebody's preaching at you, and
sure,
and the closed-minded values. And as far as Jesus, who Jesus was as a person, he wasn't that person. He was a bit of a dissident. He wasn't a super closed-minded individual. I'm not saying that he was an anarchist, or that he was a drug user and a sinner but he did hang out with those people. He yes. was open-minded to those people. Well, and a lot of people who.
That's why he was hated so much, is because he did share his table with people like that, with prostitutes, lepers, and so
right.
forth. And
I just think that a lot of people who subscribe to the typical biblical Christian whatever theology, that their values don't align with Jesus Christ as much as they think that they do.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? And
it's hard that's a hard model to follow.
Right.
Even if you believe that Jesus was not as perfect as it describes, in the Bible, Sure. I mean, because it's still like an impossible standard that we're all trying to obtain. I think it even says in the Bible, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Glory of God. That doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to be like that. It's just understand that you're going to have failures because we are imperfect creatures. And so, I mean, I grew up I was born in '77, so I grew up in the '80s when, like, the churches were saying things like, we can't have people swearing on records. This heavy metal music is making people kill themselves. It's like, my mom said, I don't want to hear you catch, I had to take my Guns N' Roses tape with me to school every day so she wouldn't search my room and find it. D&D.
Right.
They thought it was a devil worshiping game.
Right.
And I had to hide the fact that I played D&D from people. When I was in high school, playing craps was cool. I love craps. It's one of my favorite games. Playing craps was cool. And so I was rolling dice with a friend. It's like there's no money on the line or anything. Just showing them, just rolling.
Right.
And somebody in the church saw it and had to go tell like the pastor or something like that we were casting lots in the church. And I was like, come on, we weren't actually gambling.
So, and I think a lot of that censorship and closed-mindedness as far as things like that come, and then trying to govern other people's lives, you know what I mean, the way that the way that it has been, is what has turned people off from the Christian church.
I agree.
And it makes it hard for someone like myself to talk about Jesus to my friends, because I'm trying to talk about who Christ was actually as a person, and as soon as you say that word or say anything like that,
we talked about this the other day.
People, yes, exactly, people just flip a switch off.
Yeah. And
my actual belief is that the Bible is a magical grimoire, and that it's a story, it's allegories, and it's meant to be read by mystics. And when you look at it with a certain eye, and you can interpret it that way, you start reading the Bible a little bit differently, and you start seeing the verses about manifestation and things of that nature. And I think that people who are into Hinduism and New Age spirituality and Buddhism and magic and Wicca and all those things that I myself am into, that if they went back and checked out the Bible with that eye, with that, that magical eye, that mystical eye, that they would see that it's there. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, that's why it's uncool. That's why it's like, it's the religion of dad. It's dad's religion, in many ways. And then a lot of people in this generation, like your generation, are kind of just shut off by that whole thing. And so they don't want to get involved in that kind of religion. So they find something else, like, be it like Buddhism or yoga, they find something else to be, or even politics. Find something else to be a religion. Right. It's like Joe Rogan invented this idea of Sober October. And it's like, hey, man, Catholicism had this thing called Lent. You're just inventing a new religion at that point.
Right.
It's like, but instead of like in early of the year, you do it in October.
Right.
So, I mean, and I think that it says that...
I think it's cool if you want to be Christian. I think that it's cool if you want to be Hindu or
whatever.
Just try to be open-minded and okay, if you find that base religion that resonates with you the most, it's not wrong to study the Quran and read the poem, or study, the Bhagavad Gita and Hinduism, or study the Buddha and Tibetan Buddhism, or you know what I mean?
Especially if you're interested, if you're curious.
Right, yeah.
And like I said, I wanted to have conversations with people about the satanic verses or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to even discuss it, because I mean, it was taboo. It was like, even, and I wanted a Christian perspective on these things. And it felt like, we couldn't have a conversation on it because, it's like, oh, we don't want to even discuss it.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I felt like I outgrew the church, which is a shame. Because church can be fun. I've been to churches like what was big in like the 90s. There was like rock churches where they had, like a bassist and a guitar drum set in there,
and the cool youth pastor.
Yeah,
hey, kids.
Absolutely. And that's what I grew up around. And so, and they're always trying to rebrand. Christianity in different ways. Some people prefer it more; they want the pipe organs and stuff like that. Some people want it more pastoral. A lot of, and I think a lot of kids that want to experience, have fun in church. And that's mostly why I went to youth group, because there was a bunch of teenagers my age, and we're always getting into some sort of mischief, and it's always fun. At the same time, we're getting Bible stories taught to us, but mostly it was fun. And when it comes to these churches, I mean, this is where you can find your local musician. This is what I love about churches, because you get those people who can sing, and you get them to go to church, and they can sing. Like I play drums, and I played in church bands.
Well, that's what God is, man. It's that creative energy.
Absolutely.
It's that creative source.
Absolutely. And I wanted to use my skills in order to serve God. And so that's why I did these things. That's why I went to build houses for the poor. That's why I played drums in church service.
Right.
Because it was my faith had become more about works than about belief. And that was my whole issue with church, was that, we go in there every Sunday and we just pat ourselves on the back and say, what good Christians we are for coming to church on Sunday. And we sing the hymns, and it's all rote and it's blah, and it's boring as shit. And my youth group, we, instead of going to service, we would go to this homeless shelter. What'd you call it? The Thurman
Brisbane Center.
Yeah, Thurman Brisbane Center, right there downtown. We'd go there like every Sunday during the church service, spend an hour down there. We'd sing our songs. We'd talk to the people, the homeless people, and just be friendly.
Yeah.
And I love that. I thought that was a more valuable use of my time as a Christian than to sit on a bench for an hour and say, "Oh, I'm such a good boy."
Yeah.
When I first got to the church here in Fredericksburg, I'm not going to say which church, but when I first got here, it was in 91, and they didn't even have cushions on the benches in my church. It was just straight up wood benches.
Well, Jesus was a carpenter, so you have to remember that.
Well,
be mindful of it while you sit on the...
Well, I remember there was a big controversy when they got these pads to fit on, because it was like there's an element of self-flagellation to a lot of people when it comes to their religion, where they want to punish themselves, and so they want uncomfortable seating.
Right.
So, and I mean, because there are people who believe in self-flagellation. You whip yourself enough until you get endorphins going, and then you're going to have a religious experience.
Yep.
And so, but like many different things, even when it comes to DMT or psychedelics, it's beware of wisdom you did not earn. I don't think you're going to learn anything about God or the universe or anything like that by whipping yourself into a weird state of mind,
Right, or fasting, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I mean, that's another way that people...
Fasting and praying is mentioned many times in the Bible.
Right, yep. Man, I could go on all day about religion.
Yeah, it's
Scott.
2 minutes over. But we can definitely talk about this again some other time.
We could talk about it again. Yep.
Oh, okay.
We could get more into it.
Absolutely.
About because I've studied not only those base religions, but a lot of some of the other weird practices like Hermetic principle and Gnostic belief and things of that nature, ancient Egyptians. So I'm kind of all in when it comes to that. Yeah, the universe is mental.
Absolutely.
It's all what you make of it. Make this a beautiful day. Hey, well, I mean, you shouted out Thurman Brisbane Center, I guess, while we're at it.
Yeah. So
Born in Quarantine Improv this weekend that I'm a part of. We did a show at the Rec Center downtown Fredericksburg. Go check them out, follow them, all that good stuff. And it was a benefit show for the Thurman Brisbane Center to raise donations of supplies, toiletries, and such. So there's a box down there at the Rec Center if you guys want to go donate, anybody that's local to Fredericksburg. Or if you want to do a cash donation, do that to the Thurman Brisbane Center directly. If you want to go down there and volunteer, go down there and volunteer. They could always use help. And I mean, you can do that. You can do that around Christmas time. You can do it in January, February, March. It doesn't have to be Christmas or Thanksgiving. You could go to the homeless shelter and help them out in June. I'm sure they'd love it. So, and if you're not in Fredericksburg, go help out your local homeless shelter. Absolutely. I mean, why not? Yeah. Why not?
All right, and this has been our show. If you go down the description, we're going to have a bunch of links for how you can, tip us, donate to us through Cashapp, or become patrons, and so forth. If you think one of us won or lost an argument, mention it down in the comments, and maybe we'll talk about it next week. Any interesting comments, maybe we'll read. Who knows? Who knows where this show will go? Maybe one day we'll actually get into a fist fight, Scott. What do you think?
Maybe just like just like our background.
We got to have an emergency fist fight camera that I can flip to real quick.
Emergency fist fight camera. Also, comment below if there's anything you want to see us guys debate or discuss.
Absolutely.
Enjoy the trip.
Yep. See you next week.
Cool. That was good.
I thought it was really good.